The thing that strikes me as most important is that, first of all, we live in a society that says things are this way because we say so. You must believe us. If you don't believe us, you're a heretic, a kook, a crazy, a hippie, a communist, you're a terrorist, you're un-American, you're a conspiracy theorist. And so that's generally accepted. And then there's a certain proportion of the society that says, nope, wait, we don't believe that, we dissent from that opinion, we wish to disagree. And we have all these other notions, which the first group is going to lump up and say, oh, that's all just conspiracy theory. So what strikes me is that we have the ability to have these two sides, the big side and the smaller opposition side, but we don't seem to have the ability on either side to do a sorting out, to be able to sort out, to be able to say when somebody has a dissenting opinion, it may be wrong and it may be right, but we should be able to weigh it, to weigh its worth, to measure its worth. We should be able to take into consideration a statement of opposition, a statement of dissent, and analyze it and find out to what degree it is or isn't valid on its own merits. And this is something that we as a society seem to be completely incapable of doing. So it's either all or none. And we throw out the baby with the bathwater. We say either you accept everything that Big Brother wants to shove down your throat as infallibly and absolutely true and unquestionable, or you have to get locked into defending a whole bunch of nutty nonsense. But nowhere do we seem to be able to say, look, some things that are in dissent and opposition are going to be nonsense, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything that states dissent and opposition must therefore naturally be nonsense and be unworthy of consideration and be deserving of simply being tossed out the window without examining it whatsoever. And I'm reminded of this when somebody made some comment. Okay, one person makes a comment. He doesn't believe that we ever landed on the moon. Somebody comes, and the person making this comment is a religious guy who defends, is like against evolution and all that stuff. And another person makes a comment back and said, well, that figure's coming from you, that you wouldn't think that we ever landed on the moon. And then he goes on to say, and you probably also believe that Bigfoot went back in time with technology given to him by aliens and shot JFK, blah, blah, blah. And see, this is what gets me. Yeah, stuff about moon landing being fake is pretty ridiculous. Stuff about aliens and alien abductions is absolutely absurd. And if you had any notion of understanding of the distances of space and what light years are all about and how far it is from our solar system to any other solar system, you'd understand why that talk of aliens visiting Earth is just ridiculous, just absurd. It doesn't happen, it hasn't happened, it's not going to ever happen. And and whatever other nonsense notions that people have about aliens and shape-shifting reptiles and Nostradamus, whatever it is. But that doesn't, to be able to say, yeah, we dismiss these wacky notions, that doesn't dismiss the valid, very evidence-supported notions about things that actually did happen, like the assassination of John F. Kennedy and all the concocted, contrived, so-called evidence to support the idea that Oswald shot Kennedy with a single bullet rifle from behind, when we can clearly see in the film of Kennedy being shot, his head being thrown backwards and the back of his head being blown out, from not just from the film but from the actual doctor's evidence and the sketches of his head. It was blown out in the back. That's not an entrance wound, that's an exit wound, having the skull being blown out. If it was an entrance wound from the back, the bullet would go through and it would make a small hole in the back and blow out the front of his skull, but the back of his skull was what was blown out, clearly indicating that the bullet came from in front of the car and not behind it. So this is what bothers me, is that we as a society are incapable of weighing things on their own merits and using reason and evidence to determine what actually, which statements of opposition and dissent actually have inherent validity and which don't. It's either all or none, and we throw out the baby with the bathwater. So the things that really are valid conspiracy supported, evidence supported, evidence of clear conspiracies and lies by the government, such as in real events such as the assassination of Kennedy or the destruction of the World Trade Centers. These get thrown out with the bathwater. And all the reptilian aliens and Bigfoots and we didn't land on the moon and the moon is hollow or the earth is hollow. All this nonsense, that's put out there and promoted with the intention of obscuring and discouraging anybody from investigating, from conducting any kind of realistic investigations of the realistic conspiracies that have actually taken place, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And that's something that the Big Brother, believe it because we say so, society wants to encourage. Wants to encourage us to throw out the baby with the bathwater, to wrap up all things in this big laundry chute, this big laundry hamper of that's marked conspiracy theories. So anything that's a conspiracy theory gets thrown in with all the dirty laundry. Oh, and it all gets tossed out. So that the conspiracy theory people, the wackier they are, the more they get promoted. And you think, oh, you're listening to alternative radio or watching an alternative program of some sort, because they're presenting these conspiracy theorists. And you think, oh, see, I'm not listening to the mainstream, but in a way you are. In a way, all the media is all owned, ultimately, almost entirely, by the same media corporations that own everything. They own the big media, and they own the small offshoots of the big media, which are put out there to present all these nutty theories as being equally valid, thus making it easier to label anybody who believes that something that we're being told by the government isn't true. Anybody who believes any such thing must be a nut job, a whack job, because, oh, well, then you naturally believe all these other nutty things about Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and Hollow Moon and Hollow Earth and aliens this and Nostradamus and the Mayan calendar and the pyramids. So even when it seems that there's opposition, the opposition is fake too. And I think that's something that George Orwell in 1984, he saw that. He foretold that. He predicted that that's how things would get out. That's the whole theme running through 1984, is you couldn't tell, even among those who were presumably in the opposition, in the underground, you couldn't really tell who really was sincere and who was merely planted there, merely plants by the Big Brother society to try to lure you in with as a sting operation, again, to identify you as a heretic and a traitor. So what are you going to do? Well, we as a society must learn to be able to weigh things on their own merits and distinguish what is valid from what is not valid. And any time people say extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof, but there are extraordinary proofs and people don't want to listen to them. So extraordinary claims need some extraordinary consideration. Not with the presumption that they're true or that they're untrue, but to be able to weigh them on their own merits and examine and analyze the actual evidence. Not to automatically dismiss things just because they are opposition to the official truth. And so therefore they must be wacky. As we throw out the babies with the bathwater, we throw out the good with the crazy. We lump it all together and say it's either all good or it's all crazy. And that's just not the way it works in reality.